Hey guys, we're here today to go over every single normal type Pokemon in competitive. If you guys enjoy this type of video and you want to see more like it, leave a like and subscribe of course. And if you want to go the extra mile, click on the link down below to click and join our channel memberships. For just a few dollars a month, you get a lot of different perks. So with that said, make sure obviously you click that if you do enjoy, and otherwise just leaving a like is a free way to support, and subscribing of course for more. But let's get into our different tierings, because I do get the question pretty much every video we do for the tier list. What do the tierings mean and what formats are we tiering off of? So it's a good question. So the S plus Pokemon are basically the Pokemon that are hopping metagames such as Natdex Anything Goes, Sword and Shield Ubers, VGC, you name it. Basically, if it can hold its own in a restricted format against pretty much anything anything allowed, it's going to be in the S plus range. It needs to be the top of those formats though. These are Pokemon like, for example, Primal Groudon would be up here. So if you're not like Primal Groudon level or maybe like an Incineroar level as far as VGC goes, you're not going to be in the S plus range. For the S range, it's for Pokemon that are pretty decent in VGC, but they're not like top 5 Mons. For Pokemon that are pretty decent in Sword and Shield Ubers or Natdex Ubers, or anything goes I should say for Natdex, but they're not top 5 Mons. Or they're for Pokemon that are like absolutely like 1, 2, 3, 4 best in the OUs. Stuff like Landorus Therian, for example, would probably be an S Pokemon because it's such a dominating presence to where it demands that you use it on like half the teams. As far as actual Ubers go, you might see like a Rayquaza here, for example, or you might see something like, for example, Lunala might be in here. But the point being is for Pokemon that do exist, and they do a pretty good job, they're just not dominating. But the A range is for Pokemon that absolutely have no actual presence being in the Ubers range. It's for Pokemon that barely even hold on to a tiering spot to begin with in Ubers, or they're for Pokemon that are just decent in OU. For holding onto a spot, it's like your Reshiram's, for example, or maybe for the actually like decent OU Pokemon, you would get stuff like, for example, Galar Slowking that would be in this range. B ranges for Pokemon that are kind of OU, kind of UU. The point is they're kind of in between the two. For C ranges for Pokemon in between RU and UU, maybe they're just really good RU Pokemon, or maybe they're really bad UU Mons. D ranges for Pokemon that are basically NUPU, and for F tier, it's for Pokemon that are either fully evolved and suck, or intended to be fully evolved, and I included them on the list because they're not actually worse than any, they're at least better than one fully evolved Pokemon on the list, and they were intended as well to not be fully evolved, well, to be fully evolved at one point, I should say. Or they're for NFE Pokemon that are so good that they at least deserve a mention. With that said though, let's start off with Pidgeot. And this is one of our first of very many F tier normals. This will at least probably get 2 rows by the end of it, but Pidgeot's awful. There's not a lot going for it. Its stat line's terrible. The one exception it has is that it breaks 100 speed, and that's really it. Mega Pidgeot though is actually pretty decent. I give this a B tier. Offensive flying type on this Pokemon. It has pretty good momentum, and no guard with stuff like Hurricane plus Heat Wave is actually amazing because it has the coverage immediately off the bat to hit Steels, which would be a really common flying resist, and you can still U-turn out on a lot of different rock types just because of how slow they are. So even for matchups that are bad against stuff like Steels that might resist fire, maybe something like an Empoleon, for example, you can still pivot out into something else because of your immense speed and the fact you don't have a lot of other moves you really need to run. You can probably just run Hurricane, Heat Wave, then like U-turn and Roost, and you're pretty fine in a lot of games. So I definitely think Mega Pidgeot is pretty good personally, and I gotta give it B tier. Offensive fly is really good, especially when I'm on that fast. Next up though, we do Eradicate. Eradicate's another D tier Pokemon, F tier Pokemon, but it's definitely better than Mega Pidgeot at least. Alolan Eradicate is literally just slightly above that, and I think truthfully the only thing that actually gives any differentiating between these two is just the fact that Alolan Eradicate at the very least has, in my opinion, slightly better, actually no, never mind, I mixed it up. They don't both have guts. I thought the only Alolan Eradicate had Hustle and that both of them had guts. Never mind. Regular Eradicate's better, at least it has guts. Guts is pretty good. The fact that it has an ability that can still boost his offense without having to worry about missing moves to do so is definitely better. And I think despite having the dark typing, Alolan Eradicate's definitely worse. It's 4 times fighting weak, it's still really pitifully slow. In fact, it's slower than Eradicate even for base Eradicate, and it hits less hard too. On top of that as well, it doesn't even have guts. So yeah, no, this Pokemon's definitely worse. I don't think the Sucker Punch priority really makes a difference. This mon's actually just worse. Next up though is Fearow. In fact, I'm actually going to put this below Pidgeot. No, never mind. Pidgeot's taking moves. Fearow though, Fearow's pretty terrible still. Again, one of those really bad normal type mons. One thing I will say is, at least again, this hits base 100 and Sniper's kind of cool. It's better than Pidgeot, that's for sure. Is it a lot better than Pidgeot? Not really. I guess I'll give this better than Alolan Eradicate because Alolan Eradicate's terrible. Regular Eradicate will probably actually be the top of our F tier, I'll be completely honest. There might be a couple mons that pass it, but I can't see a lot. Wigglytuff, I can't lie, I know that Wigglytuff isn't like some godsend or anything, but I feel bad putting Wigglytuff in the same vein as Pokemon like, for example, Eradicate. However, actually no, not than Raticate. It's probably worse than Raticate. I think the one thing Wigglytuff has though is it's a nice Wish Passer for like if you're really trying to play a ZU tier. It's also got Roll Compression with stuff like Rocks and Heal Bell. It's not bad. It even gets Teleport. It's kind of like a budget Clef, but like a really bad budget Clef. I think the one thing that's holding it back, truthfully, is the fact that despite the obnoxious HP stat for Wishes, its defenses are terrible, and its speed gets outpaced by a lot, even as far as PU, ZU sort of tiers go. So it's not terrible. I think it's better than a lot of other Pokemon we'll actually see in this tier on this list, but just because it's good among F tier Pokemon doesn't mean it's good, so I'm going to give it F tier. Regular Persian really just has the speed going for it. I'll give it at least better than Alolan Raticate. Fake Out's kind of cool, especially with Technician, but honestly, there's not a lot going for this outside of really just Technician, plus the fact that this has kind of mixed offenses, but I say that very loosely considering the offenses are like 70 and 65 respectively. It's a terrible Pokemon, it's really just saved by Technician, but again, not good. Definitely F tier. Gmax Meowth, this is gonna literally probably be one of the only Gmaxes that we see in the F tier. Even Gmax Pikachu and Eevee at least arguably are more usable. Gmax Meowth is horseshit. You don't really get anything out of it because unlike Eevee, you don't have adaptability, and unlike Pikachu, you don't have a Light Ball. This is probably one of the only Pokemon we'll actually see that's worse, and the only reason I included it is because it's a Gmax Pokemon, in all honesty, but it's still like the worst normal that would be contentious for this list. Next up though is Farfetch'd. I'll be honest, Farfetch'd I don't think is that bad. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think the leak is kind of cool. Now, I think it's still pretty bad like compared to Fearow, but it's probably going to be top half. Honestly, Defiant's pretty cool on it, and it has a lot of really good physical coverage. And again, with the leak, you could at least crit spam a lot of stuff, especially in tandem with something like Defiant for the ability. I don't think it's great, but it's something at least, which is more than I can say for a lot of these Pokemon. Next up, though, we do have the Napdex Dodrio, which Dodrio lost a lot. Obviously, with I'm pretty sure High Jump Kick was the fighting move that it got. No, it was Jump Kick. Jump Kick got cut, so that sucks for it. It's legal in Napdex at least, but still something a Dodrio will never actually see again past Napdex OU. It still has coverage for Steals the least with Stomping Tantrum, which is kind of cool. It's not terrible. Actually, I do think, to be fair, that if Dodrio was currently in Sword and Shield, it wouldn't be an untiered Pokemon necessarily. I actually think it would be PU. Does that make it still good? No, but I do think that at least it's a D tier. It's just probably gonna be bottom of D tier. 110 and 110 for offenses is actually kind of good for a low tier flying type, especially with the fact that this does get some good coverage for steals. It gets stuff like Sword Stance. It has knockoff even. This mod actually does get a lot, and I think about a U-turn, this would actually be in contention for like a very viable like NU flying type in my personal opinion. For now, I still think it's not bad. It's just not great. Lickitung is up next. Lickitung is definitely an F tier Pokemon, but again, it's probably better than a lot of these. This goes in that top half star range. Really anything between, I think that Farfetch'd and Persian, Farfetch'd is the last line for a good Pokemon. Persian and below is where the bad mons start. For in between stuff, Lickitung obviously takes over the new dividing line here, to be fair. But once you get to Persian and on though, you're officially a bad Pokemon if you are worse than Persian. Lickitung though is definitely not bad. I think that Lickitung with a Violet, really the only competition it has is that it has to compete with Licky for a PU team slot. Otherwise, it's not terrible. It has still Wish, it still has Curse, it still has a lot of good physical coverage because it's a normal type. It still has Heal Bell, it still has a lot of things that Licky has. It's just that it's fighting in a tier where Lickitung is in the lowest tier already, so why really use Lickitung when Licky is already there? So I do think personally, Licky just being there invalidates a lot of Lickitung usage, but I think that if Licky wasn't actually like not bad Pokemon, Lickitung would actually see some good usage in lower tiers. So I don't want to put it below something like a Persian or Eradicate when it's really just unfortunate that Licky also sucks. So we'll give it F tier. Chansey's up next. Chansey definitely gets B tier. This will be the top of B. I think the fact that it's really only actually viable in OU this generation as a Natdex mod, and it's mostly just because of the fact that Z-moves exist, and this is a pretty good special Z-move sponge. And also, to be fair, it's still not some amazing Natdex OU Pokemon. It's decent for sure, but I wouldn't say this is some like super amazing top tier wall or anything. But Chansey definitely does have a lot of issues as far as being outclassed, in my opinion. However, as I said, in the best tier that it has, it's just around as viable as Blissey is, and that says a lot considering in every other format besides Natdex OU, Blissey's more viable as shown. And I think it's mostly just because Boots and Natdex, in Sword and Shield OU, as well as Natdex to a degree, that does help a lot. And as well as the fact that in BDSP, a Violet doesn't even exist. So Last gen, I think that Chansey would have for sure been the better option. This generation, though, I think that Chansey's actually finally starting to lose its mark over Blissey, which is pretty incredible. Because even if we take BDSB out of the equation, I don't think it changes a ton about the ranking. So yeah, we'll put Chansey in B, top of B though. Kangaskhan definitely gets a D tier. I can't really fathom putting it in the same sort of territory of stuff like, for example, Raticate, when this does actually have some kind of cool low tier usage to say the least, or at least viability. While this isn't actually a low tier mon, I think the fact this has pretty good bulk, as well as stuff like Wish, for example, and Scrappy normal type, this is probably gonna be one of the worst Pokemon in D that I can think of, and I might bump it down to F. But I think that Kang, at least having stuff like Wish, Fake Out, etc., does give it something, and that's more than I could say for a lot of these Pokemon. Again, just the fact that this is recovery while also being a pretty damning offensive mon, at least for low tier standards, and it has, as I said, it can hit pretty much everything it needs to, so I gotta give it to Kang. Mega Kang, though, is probably going to be one of 2 S-rank Pokemon that we actually see on today's list. Maybe 3. I'm kind of iffy on where I'm going to put Ditto, I'll be honest. But at the very least, I can think of one other Pokemon that will actually hit that S-rank. But Mega Kang is a pretty damning Pokemon as far as Ubers goes. This is something that's sadly gotten pretty shafted over the generations, though. And I think that Kang's biggest thing is the fact that it would inherently be obnoxious in OU. And I think it's obnoxiously better than even some of our OU Pokemon. And I know that typically I've been tiering Pokemon that are unviable in Nat Dex as A rank at the very least, but I think that Mega Kang is such a league above all the A ranks. I really can't justify putting it in the A rank, even if inherently, as I said, this is an unviable as fuck Nat Dex Pokemon right now. To be fair, I think it's mostly just because the fact that Nat Dex is a Dynamax heavy format, so you can't really spam S-Toss Kang as much. And I do think that if it wasn't for Dynamax, and I know it's kind of nitpicky to be fair because we're tiering Gmax Pokemon on this list, but I think if it wasn't for Dynamax, Kang would actually be a pretty okay Pokemon in Nat Dex AG. Again, to be fair, I will say as well that Mega Kang, again, you could have an argument for A, and we could just leave the S rank empty, I think. In fact, I might actually do that, because as I said, Kang is pretty fucking unviable in Nat Dex right now. You literally cannot justify using this, actually. So I'm gonna put it in A. What the heck? I think there are some better Pokemon, actually, and I'll get into those in a bit. Next up, though, we have Tauros. Tauros is, again, one of those, like, D-rank Pokemon. I don't know why I went up to C. I'm gonna put it above Kang, at least. Because one thing that Tauros does have is the fact that it has 2 really viable abilities. For one, it has Intimidate, and the other one, Sheer Force. In fact, I'm actually going to put this above Dodrio, to be fair, because I think that Sheer Force Tauros is actually a pretty big monster in low tiers. Despite having only 40 special attack, this typically can pull off some really good special coverage for stuff with Life Orb Sheer Force, because it does get a lot of good special moves, stuff like Ice Beam and Flamethrower, for example. Or if you want to go with physical on like an Intimidate set, you get a ton of good physical options like Earthquake, Close Combat, you get stuff like Facade, for example, so you have options in my opinion. I think that Tauros is definitely one of the better low tier normals, but it's still not great. Ditto, I think is going to be S. I think it's truthfully just because of the fact that it's able to take advantage of a lot of Dynamax stuff. Albeit, this is definitely a niche Pokemon, I think, in every format it's viable in. But you can't really name a lot of tiers that Ditto can't at least do some work in. And while Ditto is definitely not like a really tiered Pokemon, if we were to really look through in terms of what tiers Ditto's legal in, to say the least, Ditto is an A-rank Pokemon in Nat Dex OU. Ditto is not used in biggest POU, obviously. Ditto is a B- Pokemon even in Crown Tundra Ubers, which says a lot because they banned Max actually altogether. As far as the Nat Dex anything goes, it's a B rank Pokemon, and for Sword and Shield OU, it's a C-. So again, it's viable in almost all of these like OU Uber sort of tiers, and it's pretty high up as far as a Nat Dex setting goes with the Dynamax, and it's not bad in BGC either. Albeit again, it's not anything insane, but it's a cool niche mon. And I do think that with how many tiers it's viable in, especially at an upper level, Ditto's a mon that gets better the better Pokemon it fights against. So I do think that with that in mind, Ditto being an S Pokemon is kind of justifiable. Though, I'll be honest, if anyone was to disagree with that, I think Ditto truthfully has merit from anywhere between S+ and F. And again, it really is a Pokemon that is so obnoxious to rank, you could arguably consider giving it its own tier. But this might unironically be Ditto's own tier anyway, if we're going to be honest. There's like one Pokemon I think could compete with it. But for pretty much similar reasons to Ditto. The point being is that, honestly, if someone was to disagree with anything on this list, I think it would be Ditto's ranking. And I wouldn't blame them inherently, because Ditto is an obnoxious Pokemon to rank. Anyway, Gmax Eevee. Gmax Eevee literally is only better than Gmax Meowth, and it's just because of adaptability. I already went over that one. Porygon's up next. Porygon is kind of interesting, actually. I think a Porygon is better than, like, Lickitung, for example. This is a lot of good utility as far as a low-tier normal goes. As far as stuff that Porygon actually gets, stuff like a Violet, and it has some cool bulk. You get stuff like Trace, for example, and Download with Analytical. Like, all three of its abilities are pretty good. You get some good coverage. You're a good Teleport Mon. You have stuff like Trick Room and Recover, for example. I do think the potential that Porygon does have is at least a lot higher than the Pokemon below. And I think the Pokemon below Porygon, at least, are Pokemon you'll never even see in other tiers. And I think Porygon, you could at least make a case to be running this in, like, a PU sort of range. Albeit, it's not going to be great, but it is something. It's just that tier is so inflated with better low-tier normal, sadly, that you really wouldn't have a reason anyway. But I think it's one of the ones that has a higher ceiling as far as this sort of F tier goes. And again, I think I really attribute that just to the fact that this is a good Violet Mon, and it's one that also naturally comes armed with some pretty good offense because of stuff like Download. So I'll give it F, but I think it's one of the better ones. Snorlax is up next. Snorlax is a tricky one. It's another one that I think, again, it's really inconsistent with how good or bad Snorlax is. Like, for example, it's not great in OUs right now, but this is a pretty good VGC pawn. Albeit, I will say, though, is that Snorlax is definitely worse than it was, like, in the non-Uber metagames for sure. I'm going to put this one in B. I think it's a pretty decent one. I think it's better than, like, a Mega Pidgeot, for example. And I would put the Gmax Snorlax, actually, in the A rank. Gmax Snorlax is a pretty good max move with Gmax Replenish. Actually, I'm going to put this in A, yeah. Because when I'm thinking of Gmax Pokemon and how viable they are, for, like, the S-rank Pokemon, I think of stuff like maybe Gmax Cinderace, for example, or Gmax Rillaboom, where these are Pokemon that are pretty no drawback to run Gmaxes on when you're running them anyway. And I think Snorlax is a similar thing. However, typically it's not ever your best Maximon on any even team. Even ones you're intending to run a Gmax Snorlax on, like, for example, if I was to run Gmax Snorlax and Calyrex, Calyrex is a better better Dynamaxmon anyway. And I get that's kind of an unfair comparison to make, but I do think when comparing the Gmax Mons, the amount of times you could actually pop this should be a question that comes up. And I think that Snorlax is a weird one where it is a little bit difficult to go into it and, like, go planning that you're going to max this Pokemon. But at the same time, to be as viable as it can be, you kind of have to play it like it's your max. And it's almost never with Pokemon that you're actually partnering with it your best Maxmon. So I'm going to give it A, but I do think it's a pretty good A rank Pokemon at least. And I think, again, it's one of those that could have an argument for S, I think. I just don't personally see it. For it, F tier, this is in the below Persian, it's below Raticate, it's above Pidgeot at least. And the one thing that I'll give for it is the fact that this has, it has Agility, Baton Pass, and it has some other good setup moves. You could maybe, I guess, make Baton Pass work with this with like a Coil Agility set. But you're never actually going to do that if we're going to be honest. Also, its coverage is a lot better than Pidgeot's. I'm actually going to give it above. No, because at least this is Hustle to, like, actually suffice for itself. Anyway, next up we have Noctowl. Noctowl is, again, another not terrible Pokemon this generation. I'll put it, like, below... I'm going to put it below Fear. I think it's better than Farfetch'd at least. It has some good bulk, it has some good setup. It has a lot of good special coverage, too. And it has... It's one of those Pokemon I think can be in the right hands, like a not terrible Pokemon. Albeit, would I say Noctowl's great? Not really, but it has some cool utility with stuff like Defog. It has options to set up with like Calm Mind and Nasty Plot. It has some good coverage with stuff like Heat Wave. You have stuff like Moonblast. So I don't think it's terrible, I just don't think it's great. But Noctowl's probably one of the better F rankers. Draft Rig, horseshit. This is at least better than Furret though, because one thing I'll give Draft Rig is the fact that it's a Psychic type that is immune to Ghost. Otherwise though, Draft Rig really doesn't have a lot going for it, and if you watch my video on Pokemon that were missed type opportunities that I put up on Wednesday, you'll see I think that this should have been a Ghost Normal type, and I do agree. If this was a Ghost Normal type, this would probably be a C tier Pokemon in my opinion, but it's not. It has terrible stats, it has terrible typing, it's just not good. In my opinion though, we have Dunsparce up next, which is again one of these better Pokemon on the budget tiers. I'm going to put it above Porygon at least, and it's mostly just because of the fact that Dunsparce has a lot of actual utility going for it. And when we get into these F tiers, we really do need to compare them among each other, I think, at this point, because of how many we already have. Dunsparce does have a lot going for it, though, in my opinion. Stuff like Glare and Stealth Rocks are already some pretty good options. It's one of the few normals with really reliable a one-turn recovery. Outside of the birds, it's really like one of the only ones. It's like that, Porygon, and otherwise it's Wishmons. So I do think that Dunsparce has that going for it. It's quite literally just the insane low-tier mon as far as a Hack Scott goes. You can run stuff like Serene Grace, for example, with Headbutt, and I think you can get a lot going with this. Would I say it's amazing in general? No, but it's amazing for the F tier. Ursaring's up next. Ursaring is definitely a D tier mon. I'm gonna put this above Dodrio actually. One thing that I will give Ursaring is the fact this is an amazing Guts Breaker. As far as this mon's coverage goes, you'll get stuff like Earthquake, Close Combat, Fire Punch, Gunk Shot, Ice Punch, you name it. And Ursaring will get it. This also has Quick Feet, which is pretty decent. It's one of those Pokemon that can do damage if you were to bring it in an upper tier, but you almost would never really do that because you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. But it's a pretty good Pokemon as far as low tier normals go. 130 attack is definitely nothing that you can actually sleep on in my opinion. So we'll give this thing a D tier, and I think that there could be a case maybe to fill in that C range as we go on, because I might need to really loosen up my requirements on what makes an F rank Pokemon. But I digress. Porygon 2 is up next, and Porygon 2 is definitely going to be a top of A rank Pokemon. This has been a pretty good Trick Room setter all gen, albeit it's typically never one of the best ones. As far as VGC goes, you'll get stuff like, for example, Dusclops, which has been phenomenal, or you'll get stuff like Indeedee forms, which are pretty amazing. And I think a Porygon 2 is still a good one, and I think it's still actually one of the better ones. I just don't think it's in terms of the Indeedee or Dusclops category for VGC Trick Room. It's still a pretty good single spawn too. You'll see this typically in like the UU-RU sort of range. So I think that Porygon 2, again, just with how much it can wall stuff, is pretty amazing in that regard. You'll get some good utility moves similar to Porygon. You'll get stuff like Ice Beam, Psychic. Again, all three abilities are really good. So I gotta say, Porygon 2, mostly carried by its doubles presence, but it is still a pretty damn good doubles mon, if that. Sandler, terrible. I'll give it above Persian just because of Intimidate, and that's all I'll say to that. Otherwise, it's the same argument of stuff like Furret and Persian, where it has good coverage, but it's terrible stats and not really usable. Smeargle. Here's your other S-rank Pokemon, I'll be honest. Smeargle's better than so many of these. Smeargle's one of those Pokemon that, similar to Ditto, will compete higher at certain different tier formats. For Ditto, it's the better the Mons are. For Smeargle, it's the better the offensive archetypes are. If your teams are relying on a lot of Scarf-heavy or speed setup-heavy teams for grounded Pokemon, you're going to see a lot of Smeargle running webs, especially if they're not running boots metas. Stuff like, for example, in the Ubers formats where you're not seeing a lot of box arts running heavy-duty boots, you're going to see a lot of Smeargle. And it's going to be tearing teams up with webs and stuff like Nuzzle, Spore, you name it, and it will run it support-wise. This is a pretty obnoxious Pokemon as far as VGC goes too, to where it got so out of hand that people had to, that Dark Void got nerfed because Smeargle was just such a menace at sleep spamming. Even still though, I do think that Smeargle, even without the broken Dark Void, is still a pretty good support Pokemon in VGC, and it's still a pretty great Pokemon in every format it touches as far as legality goes. And it's one of those Pokemon I think will never actually be bad, similar to Ditto, but I can also see it quite literally in any of these tiers. So again, similar to Ditto, if you disagree, it's literally one of these two, but I do think that their potential to be viable is so much higher than anything on this list, so I gotta give it the S treatment. Miltank's up next. Miltank's gonna be our first C Pokemon, I'll be honest. And again, Miltank's another one of its Pokemon I think is, well, no, never mind, I forgot Miltank sucks in not draft. I'm gonna give it at least above, this is gonna be our new bottom of D. I'm gonna give it above Kang at least. This is definitely a better Scrappy mon, at least. With stuff like Scrappy S-Toss is pretty good, albeit Kang can do it too. But I think the other thing is the better defensive ability with Fake Out, with Thick Fat, which is pretty nice, I can't lie. This has better recovery as far as an actual reliable recovery move being Milk Shrink, which is honestly pretty cool. I think as well with stuff, for example, like Stealth Rocks that this gets, it just is, objectively speaking, probably a better Kang, I think, in every sense of the word. So I'm gonna give it the D rank territory at least. It is just a better Kang. With Blissey, Blissey's gonna be an A rank Pokemon. I'm gonna put it at least above Gmax Lax. I'm gonna put Porygon actually below Mega Kang because I think Mega Kang's a cusp S Pokemon. But Porygon 2 and is still pretty good in Trick Room. I just think that it's worse than Kang as a Pokemon, objectively speaking. Blissey's up next though, and I think that Blissey's a really good normal type Spadef Sponge in general. It's just better chancey this gen. It's got utility options like Teleport, and I think that Blissey benefits a ton from the fact that heavy duty boots are so good, and the fact that it doesn't have to worry about toxic spikes. And I know you might be thinking, well, I could just switch out with Natural Cure and cure my status. But then Blissey has to switch out if it's taken too much toxic damage for a few turns, and that in itself is pretty bad. And with a lot of teams switching over their poison methods to toxic spikes, heavy duty boots do make a big difference for Blissey. Now I won't act like this is some godsend, it can still definitely get taken advantage of pretty well in OU, but it's pretty good. And also this is one of the few Pokemon that can actually check Kyogre and Ubers thanks to the utility umbrella of all items, which is insane to think about, that utility umbrella has that sort of presence on a Pokemon like Blissey of all things. But it does. It allows Blissey to be 3KO'd by non-specs Ogre, which is pretty good because if you get rocks up on something, you could force Ogre out and start soft boiling on it pretty effortlessly because soft boil is a recovery move that's not bothered by rain. So I do think that Blissey has a lot going for it. Honestly, in singles, it's just so unviable in doubles, whereas at least Porygon 2 has a somewhat low-tier singles presence, and it's not terrible as Trick Room setting either in higher tiers. So I do think with that in mind that Blissey at least should belong below Porygon 2, but they're both pretty even as far as their viability in their respective better formats. Linoone's up next. Linoone is terrible, but it's at least not F-tier terrible. It's untiered like the rest of the F-tier, sure, but I think at least this has potential with stuff like, for example, Belly Drum. I'm going to actually probably put this like right underneath Tauros, I'll be honest. Belly Drum is pretty good. In fact, actually, no, I'm going to put it above Tauros. I remember this got banned actually from NU because of how good it is with Belly Drum. Because Belly Drum E-Speed is pretty amazing as far as priority goes. In fact, I'm gonna put this in C just because we have nothing in C right now, and I do think it's at least better than Tauros in hindsight. But I don't think it's like Mega Pidgeot good either. It's just not bad. So we'll give Linoone C. +6 E-Speeds are obnoxious to switch around. And as far as a lot of the common normal type switch-ins go, as I mentioned with Pidgeot, a lot of them are on the slower end as far as steals, rocks, etc. go. So you can typically still take advantage of them with the 100 speed and go for something like a Stomping Tantrum. So you can still definitely take advantage of a lot of Pokemon that would otherwise be switching in. So I do actually think that Linoone has that nice edge over some of these. So I'll give it C tier. It's top of C for now because it's the only one. Next up, though, we do have Swellow. Swellow's not a bad Pokemon, albeit I don't think that Swellow's amazing or anything, but it's definitely not terrible. It's definitely better than something like a Dodrio by a good amount. Swellow having good special and physical offense with stuff like Guts plus Boom Burst, I think it's pretty good. I'm actually gonna give this top a D rank, though I think you would make a case for C. The speed is really obnoxious, and it's basically just a budget Mega Pidgeot in my personal opinion. So we'll give it D rank for now. Next up is Slacking. Slacking is terrible, but at the very least it hits a lot harder than most of these low tiers. We'll put it above Porygon, but it's still really terrible. F tier. X-Blad, really great special breaker. Finally another C tier, and I'm actually gonna put this above Linoone. Throat Spray is one of those really cool items I think that helps X-Blad a lot, but at the same time though, I do think that X-Blad having just a choice specs, this will ran through teams absolutely obnoxiously with stuff like Focus Blast or Boom Burst. There's very few things as far as low tiers go that actually want to switch in on this. In fact, actually, no, I take that back, because I do think that, to be fair, I'll keep this, because I do think that at least, if nothing else, X-Blad is a more immediate threatening presence than Linoone does, whereas Linoone's really banking on the fact that you do pop that Belly Drum off, which is kind of easy to do, to be fair. I won't take that away from Linoone, but I think the fact that X-Blad just is always going to be a threat, even if you have to switch out, even if you don't get a setup move off, that I do want to at least put it, like, the rank above. Delcatty's awful, one of the worst fully evolved normals of all time. In fact, it's literally going to probably be ranked the lowest fully evolved normal of all time. The fact this Pokemon quite literally relies on having its hidden ability is the only viable thing, and even still, its hidden ability is the fact that status moves with accuracy checks are 50%. This doesn't have great utility, it doesn't have great offense, it's just a worse version of Persian with worse abilities. F tier. Spinda. Spinda at least is contrary superpower, even if it's a very illegal combination in a lot of metagames. I'll at least give it above Porygon. Actually, I'll give it at least above Slacking, to be fair. This is a lot of good utility in my opinion, actually, and Spinda is one of those very overlooked budget normals, but it's still terrible. As a huge Spinda fan, though, I at least gotta give it above Slacking. I think that this is a better Pokemon, personally. Slacking is really only gonna be good, in any sense, if you're pairing it with a Neutralizing Gasmon, and that's about it. But F tier still. Spinda's still horseshit. Zangoose. Zangoose is at least better than a lot of these. I'm gonna give it above Tauros. I'm gonna give it below Swellow above Tauros, actually, because this is a pretty good mon as far as BDSP goes. If we were to look into BDSP singles mons, Zangoose actually is not a terrible NU Pokemon with stuff like, for example, Toxic Boost being a really good way to actually just give yourself guts. It's basically guts, and you still, just like with Linoone, have access to stuff like Belly Drum, for example, but to its credit, you're probably not going to really run Belly Drum on Zangoose in most matchups because you're just better off with running Toxic Orb and then Protect 3 attacks. But this is still an absolute nightmare to actually switch around. It's one of those Pokemon that can definitely snowball, and I think the fact that it has more natural speed than Ursaring does put it above, but Skull's speed is better than that, and it can also run special, so we'll still give this thing a D tier in my personal opinion, but it's not going to be anything insane as far as an actual ranking goes. Sorry about the bit of webcam issues there. My Adobe was actually updating mid-recording, which was great. But yeah, basically though, whatever Pokemon I left off on, I think it was Zangoose. Yeah, Zangoose. Pretty good belly drum Pokemon, but it's just outclassed by Toxic Boost being so much more immediate. I do think though that in general, Swellow is the better option here. So we're gonna give it still D rank, just right below Swellow. Next up though, we do have Castform. Castform is terrible, but it's at least got something to change its type. We'll put it below Stantler at least. Stantler's still pretty not good, but it's at least not Persian bad. Actually, no, Persian at least could be a cool fast fake out Mon. I'll put it below Persian. I'm not going to give Castform too much credit, but I do love the Mon. I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for, but it's still not like, at least Persian is fake out and it's fast, so we'll give it that. Because it's a good kind of support Pokemon as far as the F tiers go. Now, next up is Kecleon. And again, Kecleon's a Mon that I kind of really don't want to put in the F tier because it's at least kind of viable, so we're going to put it above like Miltank, I think, at least. Or actually, we're gonna put it above Dodrio. Final answer. Protein is pretty good, and it has some good utility actually with stuff like Stealth Rock. It gets a lot of priority. You can typically try and use the priority actually to cheese through a lot of immunities, which is cool. For example, with Sucker Punch, you become immune to Psychics, and you can maybe change from, let's say, a Dark type move to a Shadow Sneak, and then become immune to Fighting. So you can cheese a lot of stuff with priority options, actually. It's a pretty cool AV Mon that has a surprising amount of bulk, too. I think a Kecleon's one of those things that actually could end up even just being an NU Pokemon if people really played it right, because it has a lot going for it, and I think it's still one of those weirdly unexplored Mons. But I gotta give it D tier. I think it's not bad, actually. Kecleon gets a lot of shit, but it's pretty good. Staraptor's up next. Staraptor gets a top of B tier. Actually, yeah, top of B tier. It's pretty unviable as far as Natix goes, but it's a really good Pokemon in BDSPOU right now. Well, really good might be a bit of a stretch, to be fair, but it's a not bad Mon in BDSP. It's a really good breaker, also a really good Scarf option if you're not going to run Band. It's really good with Reckless, especially, I think, being the big thing. It's base 100 with U-Turn, which is great for BDSPOU because it's considered a really fast speed tier for the format, because Gen 4 was a slow generation. So I'll give it B+, and I'll give it a B tier. It's a good Pokemon in my opinion. It's a really good flying type. Bibarel's up next. Terrible Mon, but at the same time though, I mean, there's a lot worse than Bibarel if nothing else. It's got similar to Linoone, it's got definitely like a low tier where it's not great syndrome. But I think it's a lot better than a lot of these. I'll put it above like Tauros. I don't think it's Linoone good, to be fair, but this does still have a lot going for it with like a Simple plus Sword Stance being great. It has two priority options in Aqua Jet and Quick Attack, which is pretty good because a lot of Pokemon that have Dual Stab don't have priority in both, and Bibarel does. It's also got Curse, to be fair, to take advantage of Simple, which is pretty nice. You'll get a lot of different options that I think that Bibarel could totally snowball with, but at the same time though, it's not as quick of a snowball as Linoone. It's not as immediately potent as something like Swellow or Zangoose or an X-Cloud. So I'm going to put it here. It's at least faster than Ursaring though. It's at least got more priority options and doesn't need to run in an optimal stats to be viable like Tauros does. So I'll give it above those. And I think it's pretty fair logic. Ambipom's up next. Ambipom is terrible, but I really hate that my bias aside cannot rank it that low. Because for some fucking reason, people put this in UU, and I know that people see this as a Mon that has gotten better over the generations. I do not see it though. However, bias aside, I'm gonna still put it not in the F range, even though it is probably an F rank Pokemon in my personal opinion. I'm gonna put it in D, despite being a UU Mon. I think this Mon is absolutely horseshit. The only real saving grace this actually has, truthfully, is the fact that in BDSP at the very least, there's so few actual normal switch-ins. But at the same time though, it's still just a matter of the decks being cut. Because before anyone goes in my comment section and says that, well, Ambipom is a UU Pokemon, so it must be good. You know what other Pokemon is also UU Pokemon that must be good by that logic? Let's look through the BDSP UU tier. You know what else is? Mismagius. And I'm not putting Mismagius in the B tier either when we do the Ghost tier list. It's just not happening. BDSP alone is not the only factor that is going to make me put these Pokemon in their tiers. I think it would be objectively terrible in every other tier, and I think we actually proved that. And I think the one Mon we can prove that off of, which I'll speed run to now, is Cinccino. Cinccino is currently a PU Pokemon, and Ambipom, in my personal opinion, is just a worse version of this. So I'm not going to put it in F tier, but I do think that D tier is pretty fair. I'll put it above Dodrio at least. I think it's pretty kind to it. And I guess while we're at it, I'm going to put Cinccino literally directly above it. I think that's pretty fair, again, to Cinccino, to put it right above Ambipom. They're both pretty comparable. I know I'm skipping around the dex order. I'm very sorry for that. But I could not really talk about one without talking about the other, in my opinion, because they're so comparable. The one advantage Ambipom has is that it's Fake Out, and that's a pretty good advantage, to be fair. However, the fact that Cinccino has two really good abilities to take advantage of multi-hit moves with Technician and Skill Link, and it also has a lot better of a coverage pool to take advantage of them, and it even has viable coverage options to where it's not just running like fighting options, and that's really it for non-normal type moves and not multi-hit moves. Well, to be fair, Ambipom actually some good coverage too, but I think that in general Cincinos are a bit better. And again, I think that the one big thing this has that Ambipom doesn't have is the fact that it's two really good abilities. Actually, no, they're both Technician and Skill Link. I just realized that. I thought Ambipom didn't have Technician. Even still, I'll be honest, I think that Cinccino just in general has the better coverage pool to take advantage of Skill Link, because with Ambipom you're missing out on stuff like Bullet Seed, for example, and Rock Blast. So you're really just using like Tail Slap to take advantage of Skill Link, so you might as well just not have it at that point, in my opinion. So we'll give Ambipom literally just a tier below. I think it is pretty fair. I hate this is even kind of viable in BDSP. I'll move on now. Lopunny, horseshit Pokemon. It's at least like above Furret though, and it's purely just the fact this is Fake Out. And I shit you not, that is the only reason that it is above Furret, is this is Fake Out. And it could be Klutz Switcheroo. Mega Lopunny though, it's a pretty good OU mon. Mega Lopunny is actually a pretty decent mon if I remember correctly as far as a National Dex OU goes. If we're looking at Mega Lopunny and OU, this is actually an S-. It's considered one of the best, and there's for good reason, obviously. With stuff like U-Turn and Axel, it can hit a lot of things that it was struggling before. For example, it does significantly better against Landorus matchups, and you could pivot out a lot of other things too, like bulky Psychics or Toxapex. Mega Lopunny as well is a pretty easy mon to justify throwing on a lot of good offensive builds, and a lot of different counterplay to Lop's checks are also really amazing Pokemon. Again, stuff like Landorus Therian is amazing for Pokemon like Toxapex, because you could just Earthquake it to oblivion. Or if you're going to struggle with maybe something like, let's say, a Slowbro, you can go to Koko, which is again a pretty decent Pokemon, although to be fair, I think there are better electrics that I could have mentioned than Koko, but it's still a pretty good one. The point being is that Lopunny really benefits from how good National Dex is as far as benefiting Lopunny, and it's one of those things where Lopunny makes a lot of Pokemon better, and a lot of Pokemon make Lopunny better. And I know it's kind of confusing, but I think that it fits the justification well, personally. It's another really good Fake Out mon as well, but I don't think it's as needed in Nat Dex OU currently specifically. But I'll give the top of A rank. I think you can make a case for S, to be fair, but I only think it's a very slim amount better than Kang right now as far as viability in its respective tier. Propoly's up next. Propoly's pretty terrible, but at the same time though, it is still better than a lot of F. I'll give this at least above, like, I'll give it at least above Farfetch. I think it's pretty justifiable. Defiant with Fake Out's pretty cool, and it has a really good speed tier actually. At like base 116 or 117, I think. Point being is that speed tier is actually pretty good as far as mons go in the F tier normals. I won't act like Propoly's some godsend or anything. I think that's not really doing it a lot of favors, even if it's not a bad ability. But Defiant is actually kind of a cool one, and this does still get some cool support like Fake Out, and good priority with Sucker Punch for more consistent turns. So I'll give it F, but a higher rank. Chatot, I can't lie, I feel actually dirty about putting Chatot even in the F tier. I actually don't think I could justify it, and I think it's, well, no, I kind of have to because Chatter's cut. If Chatter was cut, I would have put this in D, but because it's not, I can't really put it in D. So put it in F. Chatot does at least have more going for it, in my personal opinion, than, like, probably than Farfetch. I think that's where I'm going to put it. It has some good utility options. It's a good pivot, albeit it's just kind of slow, and it lost its best feature being Chatter with 100% confusion in base 65 with 100% accuracy too. Like, Chatter was amazing for this actually, and I think Chatter would have put it pretty high in the D range in my personal opinion, which I know is kind of a really wild claim to make, but a no drawback flying move that actually has a lot of benefits, I think it's pretty fair. Regardless of with Chatter being gone though, D tier for sure. No, F tier for sure. Munchlax, it's another one of those mons that, while it wasn't intended to be fully evolved, I think it's better than a lot of these. This actually is going to go pretty high. I'm going to put this right up at the top of the NFE normals range, because again, I think that Munchlax has some actual low tier viability going for it. And if you disagree, that's fine, you can disagree, but I think that the fact that this is a Violite with stuff like Thick Fat helps it take a lot of different hits, personally, and you can definitely run some stuff like Curse, for example, to try and cheese some threats. I think it's the best. Well, actually, no, I'm going to put it below Porygon. I'm actually going to put it at the bottom. I take that back, because Porygon at least having momentum for the team is pretty good, and also the fact that Munchlax is really only viable if you curse it up. It's still better than something like a Stantler or a Persian, though, in my opinion. Licky Licky's up next. Again, a kind of viable, but not really low tier normal. I do think it's at least better than a lot of the F tiers. I'm gonna put it right below Miltank. It's kind of just a scuffed Miltank, if I'm gonna be honest. If this thing had Stealth Rocks, I think it would be better, because stuff like Oblivious is really good utility-wise. But I think the fact that Miltank can Cleric and be a Hazard Mon and still get Seismic Toss is pretty nice going for it. Again, Miltank this is literally just rocks away from being like a really high-end Demon, but it doesn't have rocks, and I think that is kind of the deciding factor here between this and Miltank. Next up was Porygon-Z. Porygon-Z, I'm going to put this literally just right above Exploud. I think Porygon-Z, the benefit of it is the fact this is also a pretty viable mon as far as like a BDSP format goes, and it's a really good one too if you're looking at like OUU range. I'm pretty sure this actually got banned from BDSPU if I remember correctly, because of the fact that it was deemed to... No, it is BDSPU. Even still, I mean, it's still a lot more viable in something like an Exploud in this sort of format, so I'll give it that. I think that at least is the selling point, to be fair, but otherwise they're tiered pretty similarly. Porygon-Z having a base 90 speed though. Actually, no, because this is a pretty good max spawn actually. I'm gonna put this in B, but I'm gonna put it in the like lower end of B. This is a pretty good singles max spawn, and it's even kind of not terrible in doubles in some very rare instances. Albeit it's really fucking niche in doubles this gen. But I know for a fact that there have been some small formats where this has been run. But typically though, you'll see this in like battle spot singles. It's not a bad max spawn. This was ran a lot actually in Series 6 where they did the restricted formats, where they restricted a lot of stuff by usage. This is a pretty good mon as BDSPU. It's a pretty not terrible Pokemon as far as lower Sword and Shield metas go. So I'll give it B. Adaptability hits like a truck. Regigigas. Regigigas surprisingly is going to be tiered a lot higher than a lot of these. And I knew going into it, to be fair, I was going to tier Regigigas higher than I would have liked because of VGC with Weezing, even though I think it's an objectively really cheese strat. It works. But I didn't think I'd be tiering it above most normals in this list. I'm going to definitely put this below Snorlax, I think. I think a Snorlax, Chansey, Snorlax P2, Gmax, Lax, etc. all have a lot more viability as far as a BDSP format, as a VGC format goes. But Regigigas still has some nice niche situations where it's paired with Weezing and it can actually put in some good work if Weezing stays on the field. I think a lot of people have adapted around the strategy though, so it's no longer as potent as it used to be. So I'll give it B. I think that honestly Regigigas at least having a format where it can kind of do some good work in and has like a percentage of usage is better than I could say for a lot of these mons. It's so fucking sad how much higher I'm tiering this thing. I really thought this would get like a mid-C rank in first impression. Arceus, literally one of the best Pokemon of all time, objective S+. If anyone actually needs me to explain the Arceus ranking, by the way, comment it down below. I'll go on an essay. I'm not going to go into it. We're already 41 minutes in, and I still have so many months to tier that are basically the same reasons I've already mentioned for pretty comparable Pokemon. Arceus is like miles above. In fact, I could probably give this like an S++++, because it's just that much better than everything else wherever my plus key is. There we go. There we go. Because it's just that much better than everything else here. We'll just give it that. Why not? Watchog, terrible Pokemon. Absolutely terrible. I think that, to be fair, Watchog does have one thing going for it, being analytic, which is kind of cool with its speed. I'll give it like above cast form, and that's about it. Stoutland, if this still had returned, would actually be kind of a good Demon. It's probably going to be like higher end tier, to be fair. I think that Sandrush is kind of cool on it, but there's not really great low tier sand with it. We'll put it like right there, I want to say, because to be fair, I think that one thing that Stoutland does have going for it is the fact that at the very least, if nothing else, Stoutland does have the benefit of having two really good abilities being Scrap. Well, three good abilities actually. Intimidate, Sandrush, and Scrap are all pretty good. And Facade's not terrible actually as well, if you're gonna go with that. But oh my god, Missing Return was like a huge... It was one of those normals that really fucking minds it. A lot of them can run Facade. This one really hates the fact that it can't run Facade on Scrappy sets, in my opinion. Unpheasant, it's still dog shit Pokemon. I know this got like some better things this gen. That's great and all. I still personally think it's worse than like a lot of these, I'll be honest. I'm gonna put it above like at the very least Porygon. Unpheasant at the very least. Yeah, no, I can't really give Unpheasant a lot of things, actually, I'm not gonna lie. Because if nothing else, Unpheasant at least being a almost fast flying type at 93 is kind of good. Dueling Reed and Braybird are pretty cool on it with stuff like U-Turn, but oh my god, this mon still sucks. It's still a terrible Pokemon. Audino, I know Audino's not like a really hot Pokemon right now, but I gotta say, Audino's probably better than a lot of things in this list in singles. I'm gonna put Audino like above Kecleon. That might be a bit of a hot take, but I think the regen on it's pretty good actually. And you get some good support moves. It's a pretty unique mon as far as PU setting goes, and I think unlike something like a Miltank or a Licky, this generation I think regen is a lot, and that's not to say that regen was ever bad, but I think that regen truly does make or break a lot of teams this generation as far as good team comps go, when you're looking for bulky support Pokemon, which is a regen is a really good selling point this gen because of how much you're switching and how little you're mining hazards these days too, because you really gain up a lot of that HP these days. So I'll give it to Audino. It has a lot of good support options, and it's unironically in a standard format a lot better than most of these mons. Mega Audino, I'm going to give it a C rank, and I think it's mostly just the fact that this is a pretty good fairy. I think as well the fact that you could run this pre-Mega, get your regions off, and then just start walling stuff like dragons, for example, or fighting types becoming neutral versus them. I think it's pretty good. I won't act like this is some godsend or anything. It's still not great, but it's basically just Audino just does more versatility and can help itself defensively. So I gotta give it that. Hisuian Zoroark, very unironically, I'm gonna give Hisuian Zoroark probably like a top B tier. I think the one thing that does hurt this mon a lot is the fact that this has no slated coverage. For example, if we were to look currently on the PLA Mons tier on Radical Red, it does actually give a lot of different things as far as preliminary screenings to the Hisuian Mons. If we look at the Hisuian Zoroark moveset, this doesn't get a lot of good coverage. However, what it does get is pretty nice. You get stuff like Hyper Beam, for example, as your best normal stab, and then you go down to Swift, which is terrible. You get stuff like Flamethrower and Dark Pulse and Extra Sensory, which is some good coverage. Same as Sludge Bomb too, actually. However, that's really it. You get Nasty Plot. You don't get U-Turn though. You don't get Focus Blast. You don't get a lot of things. But I still think the fact that Illusion with the 110 speed is a pretty hard thing to turn down, especially when this still has 125 special attack. And the typing itself is incredibly potent, considering you have so many immunities. I think if this thing does get U-Turn down the line, this has an argument for really high A tier, low S even, personally. And I know that might be a bit jumping the gun, but I think that Illusion on a Pokemon with this damning of a typing is not something to be trifled with. But for now, I'm going to put it in a B, just because I cannot really justify putting it in the A rank when it has such a terrible moveset right now. Though I will admit this will probably get a lot better. Sawsbuck, terrible mon. Chlorophyll does save it a bit, same as Serene Grace. It's not as bad as a lot of these, actually. I'm gonna put it above Spinda. Final answer. Really, this is not a mon to write home about, in my opinion. It's the coolest form at the very least, though, is the winter form. So I'm gonna put that one on here. But man, this is terrible. Really terrible Pokemon, and especially losing Jump Kick is such a bad thing for it, because it lost like one of its better fighting options. So yeah, we'll give it F tier. Bouffalant, Bouffalant's not as terrible as a lot of these. It's probably one of the better F tiers, actually. I can't lie, it's just really good coverage. I'm gonna put this right above. Put it right above Whaley Tough, actually. I think Eradicate is probably, as I said, it's gonna be the best one in F tier. I think it's just because of Guts plus Hustle being two really damning abilities. But Bouffalant's a pretty close second, actually, and I think that it's mostly just because the fact that Reckless is a really good ability with something like a head charge. It's a pretty good normal stab. And actually, you know what? I can't lie. I think I'm actually going to put it in the D tier, like really bottom of D tier. I think that realistically, the fact that this is a normal, it doesn't actually need to be burned to pop Facade, because it has a reliable normal move with head charge. It's kind of good with Reckless, I can't lie. And it has a lot of good coverage too, and Sword Stance. So, you know what, we'll give Bouffalant that. It can at least not be an F tier Pokemon. Congratulations. Braviary. Braviary is a pretty decent low tier normal type. Solid Enumon, really good abilities with stuff like Sheer Force and Defiant. Really good coverage, really good choice mon. I'm definitely gonna give this thing a C tier. I'll put it above Audino. I think I'm gonna put it below. I don't know. I'm gonna put it like right next to Exploud. These are pretty interchangeable for the same reasons that just like with Exploud, how it immediately starts potent, so does Braviary. Meloetta's a pretty decent mon, actually. I think that Meloetta also definitely gets a lot of shit. Meloetta is a pretty cool Assault Vest Pokemon. This is a pretty good Ghost Sponge too, actually, and it has a lot of good utility as far as coverage goes. You could run stuff like Assault Vest sets. You can go Calm Mind. It's cool Cleric. It's definitely better, I think, than a lot of these Pokemon, I'll be completely honest. But that's not really saying a lot with our normal type quality. I'm going to put it below Linoone, I think. And I think I'm going to also, with that, put Pirouette right next to it. Because Pirouette's something that I think it's as viable, I'll be honest. I think you could pop a lot of really good Pirouette sets and take advantage of a lot of teams with it. But the issue being is that you're giving up being base Meloetta for it, which kind of sucks. But it's one of those high risk, high reward things where, yeah, you could be viable once you pop the Relics on, which could actually be really good for you in some cases, because you could put a Pokemon to sleep potentially with Serene Grace, which has a pretty high chance, actually, thanks to Relics on. To put it in perspective, with Relics on in your moveset, you're going to be doing, let's see, so I need to set this to Nat Dex, don't I? Because Relics on is technically cut. So Relics on, you get a 20% chance thanks to Serene Grace to put a Pokemon to sleep, and you also get the special boost, which is something good for Meloetta. However, you're pretty much committed to running a mixed set, which is sadly the only reason I would put it below Meloetta, but it's still a pretty good Pokemon when you pop it. Diggersby's up next though. Diggersby honestly just gets a really high C. Again, Diggersby's one of those really like decent low tier mons. I think you can make a case for bottom of B, I'll be honest. I think it's just the fact that there's a lot of other normals. I think that this whole tier of normals I think is so far above Vigor's B that I can't really justify putting it there. But it's not bad. Huge Power is obviously really good and has some good priority too. Ground Normal surprisingly hits pretty well offensively, especially when you do get a lot of good coverage options to clear through. In fact, Ground alone covers a lot of different normal shifts. And you get stuff for Ghost at the very least too on this Pokemon with stuff like Knockoff. So I'll give it a C. This is probably going to be the peak of C. Pyroar. Terrible mon, but it's a normal type at least that has natural built-in coverage for steals. I'll put it above Stoutland. I think it's actually, I'll put it above, yeah, I'll put it above Stoutland. The natural speed's really good, but Propolyg is just a better speed tier. And I think a lot of these Pokemon have a lot better bulk, reliable recovery, usually 2 of the 3, or they have really good speed. So I'll give it F tier, but it's one of the better. Furfrow's so terrible. I'm so glad we're past the Furfrow being good meta. I'll put it below Persian. I think that Fur Coat is pretty good on it, and that's really all you get. Helilisk is a pretty good one, actually. This is a pretty good NU-RU mon. Typically, NU is what I've been seeing. I'm gonna put it above Mega Auto at the very least. Helilisk having some, actually, yeah, I'm gonna put it above that. Realistically, this is a Pokemon that, in theory, should have some merit in VGC, I feel like, with the fast speed tier. You get some good Paris support with Glare. You take advantage of a lot of different weathers, but that's the thing. I feel like that Helilisk just kind of sucks because there's a lot better options in doubles. However, in singles, this is a pretty good choice mon as far as RU goes. It's one of those, again, you can take advantage of weather if it's there, but it's not usually around with it. But Helilisk is definitely a really good specs mon. You get stuff like Hyper Voice, for example, Volt Switch, Focus Blast, you name it. So I'll give it C. It's definitely one of the worst C mons in my personal opinion, despite the fact that a lot of these are NU or NUBL. I personally think that a lot of these have just a lot more potency, but agree to disagree, I guess. Toucannon's up next. Toucannon's pretty terrible, but again, it's one of the better flying types as far as flying normals go. I'm going to put it above Wigglytuff. Actually, I'm going to put it above Raticate, I think, because Toucannon actually has a lot going for it. As far as stuff like, for example, you'll have stuff like Skill Link and Sheer Force going for it, which is pretty good. Oh, I just realized I was checking that dex for Helilisk. I think it is an NU Pokemon, actually, as far as Sword and Shield goes. Yeah, it's an NU Pokemon. Okay, so I knew it was. I was going to say, this felt like a Pokemon that was worse than a lot of those NUs. So that makes a lot of sense. I was checking the wrong tier. But Toucannon's still not a terrible Pokemon as far as the Nat Dex setting goes, and I think it has a lot going for it with stuff like Skill Link and Sheer Force. Has a ton of different moves to take advantage of it. However, it's just too slow. It's too slow, but it has some kind of okay bulk. I think it's one of the better mons here. I'm actually going to put it below Raticate, because Raticate, again, just has the speed on it. But it's a really good breaker as far as low tier goes, so we'll give it that. Gumshoes is terrible, but I can't lie, Stakeout being a kind of pseudo pursuit is not bad for it. One thing I will say though is that Gumshoes definitely does have some really good abilities and some really good coverage, but at the same time, horrible base 45 speed. Like, this isn't Toucannon being 60, which is at least kind of good for low tiers. 45 is still terrible in low tiers, as we mentioned with the Wigglytuff. However, because it has multiple good abilities, I'm at least going to put it above Stoutland. Stoutland's kind of the metric for like the middle tier of F somehow at this point, but having adaptability plus Stakeout, 2 really amazing abilities offensively, and Strong Jaw too, actually, which when Strong Jaw is somehow your worst ability, I think it says a lot actually about the ability quality of this. However, again, it just can't really ever take advantage of any of those in my opinion. Bewear's up next. Bewear's definitely an interesting one in my personal opinion. Really cool low tier mon. Again, similar to a lot of the C tier range where it's like NU, NUBL range, really good steel killer. I'm actually going to put it right below Linoone. It's basically just a really good option for a normal type that can still cover its options immediately, unlike Meloetta can. And it also just has Fluffy, which I think, while it's a worse ability than Furco objectively in every sense, it's really good defensively, and you don't really see a lot of fire types in those lower tiers that are actually going to, well, no, actually you do in lower tiers, to be fair. There's a lot of good fire types, but even still there, you still have a lot of options with Bewear as far as an offensive set goes, and it's rather bulky too. I think as well, when you're comparing Bewear to some other Pokemon in these lower tiers, that I think the biggest kicker for it would, I've already just said the point of the fact that it's a good steel killer, just a little slow, but it's still not bad. Oranguru is kind of cool in doubles, actually. I know it has some very, 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 very niche things in non-restricted formats. I'm going to give it D out of that, just purely off of that alone. Just because Instruct, at least, is something I could think of that is a situation where I would be doing stuff. But Oranguru will be the lowest one in D, and I can safely say that right now. Type Null. Type Null is an NFE, but I think it's a lot better than most of these. I'm going to put it in the D range. I think it's just because the fact that Silvally stats, thrown a Violet on it, it's a not bad pivot. I think it's definitely obnoxiously better than a lot of these Pokemon, but oh my god, it's still not great. Silvally. Silvally is a normal type. This is probably one of his better types. Again, I'm going to put it literally like right here, because if nothing else, Silvally normal has a lot more potential to be good, but oh my god, it's still not great. Kamala, wow, we're really getting these cusp demons. Kamala having Comatose is kind of cool. It has some good options. It's good utility. It's good priority. It's an okay bulk. I'll be honest, I think this would be kind of like a PU Pokemon right now. I'm gonna... Okay, well, I don't think it would be a PUmon, actually. I take it back. I'm gonna put it below Wigglytuff. I think the fact that it can't input to sleep is pretty cool. And you can run just like Sleep Talk Last Resort sets, which are actually not bad on band. It's really all you get though, but it's something. Drampa's pretty cool actually as far as low tier normals go. Drampa having a Dragon Normal type and Berserk is honestly really nice. It's a PU band, so I can't put it in F tier at the very least. We're gonna put it above Bouffalant, I think. No, I'm gonna put it above Kang. I think Licky, to be fair, has a potential to be a lot better in lower tier setting. I think it could actually be a kind of viable mon looking at this format, barring Hitmonlee, which is really the one damning thing for it that I can see. But Drampa's still not terrible. I just think that there's enough that counters it in this tier. And also, it's again just really fucking slow. And for an offensive mon to be that slow without great bulk is kind of a detriment. Greedent's up next. Greedent, terrible mon, but I would be lying if I said that I think that Greedent is even bottom half as far as that F tier goes. Greedent's probably one of these better F tiers. I'm gonna put it above. Put it above Gumshoes, and I think it's purely just the fact that this is Cheek Pouch plus Belladrum, which is actually kind of cool. Same as in fact, wait, yeah, literally, I think the Cheek Pouch is actually pretty cool with Belladrum. It's really all it gets though. Is the fact you can basically get back to full or like just about near full after that. That's all it gets though. Double's kind of cool. This has some good abilities. However, again, still not great coverage. It's really just, you know, Cotton Guard, Body Press, plus a normal move. It's about it, which even still doesn't get a lot of great normal moves. Definitely one of the worst normals as far as F tier goes, but it's probably still better than like Farfetch'd, Chatot, etc. I'm gonna put it right here. Now I'm gonna put it actually above Gumshoes because if nothing else, Body Press plus Cotton Guard is kind of cool in a Rest Talk set. This is borderline a fighting type. I'll be honest, I should put this on fighting type tier list when I do it. Obstagoon, finally a good mon again. Obstagoon definitely is going to get in the B tier range. I'm going to put it above Regigigas. Because if nothing else, I think Obstagoon is an actual really good singles presence. It's a really great Gutsmon. You can even see this occasionally doing work. Like, for example, Joey did some great work in the Suspect test for Calyrex Shadow and Ubers with this. And also, it's a not terribly it's not terribly unviable OU Pokemon. However, it's just not great in those tiers. It's just very, very niche. I'll give it B tier just because we have so little competition for it. Indeedee forms, finally. Indeedee male. We're going to put Indeedee male in D tier, but it's really just because it's in comparison. I'm going to put it above Kecleon. I think this is a cool Pokemon as far as singles goes, and it's one of those mons I think has potential. It's just objectively worse than Indeedee female. Indeedee female, though, I'm actually going to put really high. I'm going to put this in the A tier. I'm going to put it above Porygon 2. It's one of those better Trick Room setters than Porygon 2, but I don't think it's better by a lot anymore. It's one of those things where I think that Porygon 2 benefits from having natural recovery, which is really invaluable when taking on Calyrex Shadow. But Indeedee benefits from being a good size spam option, not only with Calyrex Shadow that is immune to it, but it's also a really good option for size spam that's immune to other ghost types, and it's a really good Trick Room setter to give size spam those Trick Room routes. And some good support with stuff like Follow Me too. Actually, Indeedee can't set Trick Room. With female, it cannot actually set Trick Room, and I did learn that the other day. I don't know why I was doing it that way. Even still, though, the Follow Me support is honestly really immaculate. Being able to direct other Pokemon to you, even with the Psychic Terrain up, because the fact that this is a self-target priority move. As well as you get some cool options like Expanding Force, obviously. This doubles monster, in my personal opinion. So, we're going to give it the A tier. We have 2 more Pokemon left. Weird is up next. And Wyrdeer actually has some good options going for it. Because it's coming off of Stantler, this is already confirmed to get a lot of good coverage options. And its bulk isn't even that terrible. I think the fact that Stantler will now be able to hold no Violate is truthfully one of the reasons it's somehow not in the bottom like 10 of normal types. Still not great though, but it's something. Actually, no, I can't lie. With Stantler having a Violate, that actually does make me reevaluate it. I just realized that. Because Stantler can hold no Violate now, we'll put it above Slacking. Final answer. Wyrdeer though, I think Wyrdeer is going to be. We'll put it in the D. We'll put it above Oranguru. I do want to be a bit conservative with this though, because it still is really slow. But 105 in both offenses is pretty cool, and Second Normal isn't a terrible offensive typing. It's just not great. Finally though, Ursaluna. Ursaluna is going to get the second highest in A tier. I did see someone actually in my comment section mentioning this could have been an S-rank Pokemon, and I'll be honest, I could see it. I could see it down the line. Similarly though to how I respond to them, I want to be a little bit more conservative with this because we don't know how the metagame will actually shape up when it's in its first competitive metagame. And typically Trick Room as well is a little bit less sought after. But I will say if any Pokemon was to ever make Trick Room like a really viable thing in OU, like a truly viable thing in OU,
I think Ursaluna is the closest we've ever gotten to it, in my opinion. Besides Magearna, this is the closest we've ever gotten to it. So I think that this honestly could give a lot of potential for Trick Room to be really good. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with the tier list? Do you guys disagree? I'm so sorry. This took about an hour. There's so many normal types. It's like the second most populated type. But if you enjoyed this, leave a like below and subscribe for more content like this. Shout out to our channel members being Josh, aka Ultra Player, Mia, and Zeke Zero. You guys help a ton with the channel, and your support is greatly appreciated monetarily. But if you don't want to go the extra mile and give some of your money away each month, subscribing and leaving a like and commenting what you want to see next is honestly another all of them are really free and easy ways to support the channel, and I appreciate it very much. With that said, I will see you guys in the next video on Monday. Until then, peace out, guys.